Hello YouTube and welcome to my channel. My name is Brian and I am the autoimmune athlete. I want to tell you a little bit about myself, my story, and then that will help explain why I began this channel. First of all, I'm a husband. My wife and I have been together for almost 12 years. We have 4 children, all of which have now graduated high school, and we are a blended family. I'm also a veteran. I served for 4 years in the United States Air Force as an armament systems specialist. I worked specifically on the A-10, and I also spent a couple of years on the base honor guard. I am also an educator. I teach health and wellness and physical education for the local alternative school. A lot of people, whenever I describe what I do, they kind of wonder, why an alternative school? And I'll tell you, it's one of the most rewarding jobs outside of spending time in the military. It's one of the most rewarding jobs that I have had, and I love what I do. And I'm also an athlete. I run anything, at least up to this point, I've ran anything from 5K up to half marathon, with plans of going beyond that as far as distances go. I also love to cycle. I have a road bike and a mountain bike. And then I just love doing other activities. I love going to the local YMCA and playing basketball with my son. I do a lot of resistance training, and so that is a big part of my life. So we've talked a little bit about me and who I am. We understand the athlete part, but now I want to talk about why the autoimmune is there. In February of last year, of 2018, I was actually set out. It was a Saturday morning. I had set out for a training run. I was going to run the local half marathon here where I live. And I set out for a training run. It was 6 miles, and very cold that morning, at least here in Tennessee, it was cold. And I set out and ran 3 miles away from my car from where I was parked, and then ran back. And I got approximately a half a mile away from my car, and I started aching. My knees started to ache a little bit. My ankles started to ache a little bit. And I was trying to, process while I was running. Could I have stepped off on something? After maybe a tenth of a mile or so, it began to subside a little bit. So I got to the end of my run where I began to walk, and my normal routine was to always walk to my car and then stretch and then get my car and go home. Well, the moment that I stopped walking, my whole body began to ache and I began to chill. So my first thought was, I hope I don't have the flu. By the time I made it back to my car, I was so sick. I was so cold. I could not get warm. Even if I ramped the heat up in my car, I could not get warm. And I remember coming home, and I got into the bedroom, and I'd already called my wife on the way home and told her that I didn't feel great. And I remember coming home and just crashing on the floor. I didn't feel like climbing in the bed. I just laid down on the floor. I hurt so bad. Few hours later, I wasn't feeling any better and got up and went and was tested for the flu and tested positive for type A. About a week went by for me to recover. And about midway through that week, that following Wednesday, I went back to the doctor because I was still hurting quite a bit. And I started noticing some numbness and some tingling in my fingertips and in the tips of my toes. And I thought maybe that was just a side effect of how bad things were in my primary care physician didn't seem to think it was much worse either. So I went back home, and around Saturday I started to feel better. With the exception of my fingertips and my toes were not better. They were still kind of numb and tingling. And I also noticed that whenever I went to stretch, I wasn't going to run that day, but as I got up to stretch, not only was I tight in my hamstrings, but I could barely bend over as it was. So that kind of bothered me. But again, I just kind of shook it off. Maybe I was in bed so much that, I was just extremely tight from that. The following, I believe is the following Wednesday, the numbness and the tingling was not going away. So I went back to my primary care, where she ran a battery of blood tests and some other things to test me for everything. They test everything from Lyme's disease to looking for cancer, looking for whatever they could find. It took a few days for the blood test to come back, and that following week she could find nothing wrong. So she referred me to the local neurologist. He ran a series of tests. He determined that I did have the beginnings of nerve damage. To what extent that was, he was not sure. So we ran some other neurologic tests, and my neurologist at the time started to come up with a diagnosis known as CIDP, also known as chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy. There were some symptoms that I was having that did not really match this disease. However, I did not match other autoimmune diseases such as Guillain-Barré and ALS and some others. Around the 1st of April, I went through a battery of steroid injections and a therapy to try to hopefully decrease the inflammation and, possibly reverse some of the damage that I was having. Now, at this point, the numbness and tingling had worked its way into my hands and had worked in my feet all the way up to about my ankle. At this point, I hadn't really suffered any weaknesses. I was still able to walk and feed myself and whatnot, but walking was difficult simply from the fact that I could barely feel the bottom of my feet. So my gait was highly compromised at that point. From there, things started after the steroid therapy. Obviously I felt great. I felt like I had a ton of energy, and but things still weren't right. They weren't getting better. The headaches continued, and I continued the steroids until around the 1st of May, at which point things were not working and I was continuing to digress. And at this point, the polyneuropathy had gotten so bad in my feet that not only was I struggling to walk, but it was almost to the point it was unsafe to walk, and I was pretty much at the point that I could not drive because I could not feel the brake and the gas pedals. My neurologist decided to try me on a different treatment. This was a plasmapheresis, and for those of you that may or may not be aware, this is a type of transfusion that is very similar to dialysis, where basically they go in and they take the plasma out of your blood and cycle it through a machine, and then put new clean plasma back into your blood system and put it back into your body. I did not take to the plasmapheresis very well. As a matter of fact, at the end of the treatment, within the last probably 10 minutes of everything cycling back through, I blacked out. Blood pressure dropped to 50/30, and if the physician had not been there right then and there, there's a possibility according to him, that I could have had a heart attack. So that was a very eye-opening experience. It was a very scary experience. Because of that, and because of some other tests that we ran during that time frame, I had some MRIs. I had another lumbar puncture. We had ran another nerve conduction study, and I was not getting better. And because of the rate of the progression, we were having a hard time understanding where I was at with my treatment, and why things were not working. So at that time, I went at the 1st of June and spent 8 days at the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, Florida. And again, they ran me through a whole battery of tests. Again, lumbar punctures, blood tests. I had more nerve conduction studies, and then they began me on a treatment called IVIG. Now, I had IVIG not long, I should say, before the plasmapheresis, and really no response to it. And so while I was receiving all these different tests and whatnot at the Mayo Clinic, they came in and I had 3 infusions of IVIG before I was discharged. They also took a part of my sural nerve, which is a nerve that runs behind the outside of your ankle. And I had that removed so that they could do a biopsy on it and run some tests. Again, those tests and whatnot ended up all coming back, and the best thing that the doctors could state was that I did have an autoimmune disease, and it was somewhere between Guillain-Barré and CIDP. From that point, I went to a rehabilitation hospital here in Southeast Tennessee called Siskin Rehab, and I spent approximately 2.5 weeks there receiving intensive physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy. If I could go back, around the middle of April, I also began to lose function in my face. I got to the point where I had no facial expression at all. As you can see in this picture with me and my children, that was me attempting to smile. That's how severe everything was. I had no facial expressions, no control over it, and it affected my speech as well as my ability to eat. So while I was at Siskin, I also received speech therapy. The therapy was very hard. It was very rigorous. The thought was hopefully to reverse things, and those things did not reverse. As a matter of fact, I continued to progress. When I left Siskin, I was at the point that I could no longer walk. I was in a wheelchair. I could push my wheelchair. It bothered me. It would cause my neuropathy to flare up. And so I came home, and this was right before the beginning of July. So this was about a year ago from today, from this video, July the 1st. And from there, things just continued to get worse. I continued to get weaker. My neuropathy continued to work its way up my arms and my legs, and I continued to lose function over the next several months. In August, I attempted to go back to work and could not handle it, could not handle the heat. If I had took the students outside, I could not handle the heat. I had a hard time going to therapy for 2 hours, 3 days a week, on top of trying to work every single day. And so I got to the point that I had to quit work. I didn't quit work, but I went on FMLA because I could not handle the work load as well as my therapies and whatnot. And I had gotten to the point where I began to struggle with therapy. So again, the progression, it just got worse. I continued with the IVIG treatments. And again, I'll go into those in more detail later so that we all know what we're talking about, or what I'm talking about. But By the end of October, things just weren't working. And I was at the point to where I needed assistance with everything, going to the restroom, taking a bath, changing my clothes. I had to use special tools to be able to eat, and even then I struggled. My diet became a lot of liquid stuff. I preferred milkshakes and smoothies and stuff like that over regular food because I couldn't handle anything else. And by this time, by around October 1st, November, I had probably lost approximately 40 to 50 pounds, if my best guess. I was around 180. I'm 6 foot tall. I was around 180 at the time that I got sick, and I probably was very close to about 130 by Christmas. I had lost that much weight. Um, the holidays were rough because I could not truly spend time with my family. We did. I was with my family as much as I could be and tried to celebrate, but it was very difficult. Just everything was hard, and all I really wanted to do was sleep. I wouldn't say I ever got to the point of depression, but I didn't feel great. And around the 1st of December, my neurologist wanted to start another treatment because the IVIG was clearly not working. So we began on a chemotherapy by the name of rituximab. I took that therapy and I had my first round. It was around the 1st of December. And then a week later, I had the second dose of that first round. And my neurologist told me, he said it would take around 2 months before I knew if that was going to work or not, if it was going to slow the progression of the disease and allow me to heal. And so, like I said, Christmas became difficult. Then around the second week of January, I just out of the blue started feeling better. I no longer felt like sleeping. It was just my mood began to change. I could tell something was different. And so as the months went by, I started progressively getting better, getting to where I could sit up on my own without having to have somebody pull me up. Being able, to use my hands a little bit better as far as, holding a fork or holding a spoon. Just little bitty things. My transfers on my sliding board were getting better. And, now we're to the point that I'm working on standing in my physical therapy. I've got pretty much full use of my entire upper body with the exception of my hands. And you all will notice in my videos that I'm pretty much a talker, and I talk with my hands quite a bit, but as you can kind of see with my hands, I don't have the ability to open them yet. I have good wrist control. I have very good upper arm strength. It's all coming back, but my hands just aren't quite there yet. From the waist to my knees are getting stronger again. Standing is something that I'm working quite a bit with, not to the point where we're walking or anything, but doing a lot more. My therapy has gone from just stretching and keeping me from developing things called contractures and stuff that we'll talk about at a later time, to working on strengthening and becoming functional again. So that's me. That's been kind of my journey over the past year. And I've noticed over the past year that there's not a lot of research out there in regards to these types of diseases. There's some conflicting information. There are different schools of thought as far as treatments, as far as therapy, and there's not a great deal of support systems out there. There's not a lot of different organizations out there like there is for different diseases like cancer. But my goal is for this channel to be a conduit to hopefully pushing more information out there and reaching out to more people that struggle the way that I do and the way that I have, because it is a very debilitating disease. I want to share my experiences, and that way maybe others can advocate for themselves by learning through the experiences that I've been through. There are a lot of videos out there that they do a good job of showing people that have gone through CIDP or they've gone through Guillain-Barré, and it shows clips of their journey and how they were healthy and then they were sick and then they were healthy again. But then there's really not a lot of explaining going on, a lot of education going on, and that's what I hope to do. I hope to use some of my educator skills to better inform the community of what's going on, and in turn maybe we can get this thing rolling and reach more people. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my video today. Please like and subscribe to the channel, as I really plan on putting up a lot more information and whatnot. And you know, in the comments below, you know, if you have questions, if you have topics you would like for me to hit on, I've already started making a list of different subjects that I can sit and talk about. Some of my videos may just be clips of me going through therapy on certain days. There may not be a lot of talking. It may just be more watching and seeing the progression that I'm making. But if there are things that you want to hear about, please let me know. I want to thank you for watching. I want you to have a blessed day, and I will see you next time.